Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Julie Whitaker and I'm producing the meeting this evening. On behalf of the A.R.P.R. Council members, I thank you for attending the webinar AGM this evening. Before I hand you over, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Julie Whitaker and I'm producing the meeting this evening. On behalf of the A.P.R.A. Council members, I thank you for attending this webinar AGM this evening. Before I hand over to your chairman, I'd just like to go through the protocols and webinar functions that we'll be adopting during this meeting. To access the functions which we shall be using this evening, you will first need to tap your screen, or if using a mobile or tablet device of any kind, or move your mouse over the screen if you're using a PC, laptop or Mac. Depending on the device, you will find three options on the top, bottom or side of your screen, and they are chat, raise hand and Q&A. During this meeting, the council members will not actively be monitoring the chat for points of order, and therefore, unless it is an emergency, please refrain from using this function. We may put links in the chat for you to read, and I will tell you if we're doing so. The raise hand function we are likely to use for proposing and seconding any motions requiring such action. If you'd like to test this function, please by all means press the raise hand button now and then lower it in the next 30 seconds. As for the Q&A, this is where you'll be able to ask questions about any point being discussed. We would ask that you wait to put your question into the Q&A until the subject or item on the agenda is being discussed. That will make facilitation of your question much easier and less likely to be missed. Additionally, you will be able to see all the questions being asked by others. And if you see a question you wish to hear the answer to, you can upvote it by clicking on the thumbs up sign in the bottom left of the question box. Finally, there may be a chance that you're invited into the council member space to ask your question on screen. If invited, you will need to accept the invitation, and once in the council member space, you will need to turn on your microphone and camera before asking your question. If you prefer not to accept the invitation, then feel free to decline it. If you do accept, it should be one question at a time, with each question taking no more than a minute to ask. In a moment, I'll place a summary of this guidance in the chat should you wish to read it. It now gives me great pleasure to hand over to your chairman, Nigel Stapleton.
Good evening, and thank you, Julie. At the two previous webinars we've had, James Hasler has hosted them, but Julie has kindly taken over that role tonight because James, now social functions are starting to get back to normal, is hosting a livery function in person in London this evening. One new innovation is that non-members who are not able to join in the webinar can at this moment be live streaming on YouTube. And I hope that helps in achieving our objective of getting as many residents on this estate involved as they possibly can. The first AGM I chaired was almost exactly a year ago, the part 2 AGM of our 64th AGM on Tuesday, December the 15th. Then, unless you lived in or worked in Downing Street, we were all in pretty strict lockdown. Things are better today, but let's not forget, unfortunately, that the high hopes we had for a near normal Christmas were dashed just before Christmas. But I think we should all be confident that 100 million vaccines and more since then should enable us to have a jolly good Christmas. And I have already, through our newsletter, given you our best wishes from the council for the Christmas ahead. We then moved on to a part 2 AGM in April, unfortunately also in Zoom, but with the restrictions somewhat less tight. And I think we're, the council are pleased that they did take the precaution of not having this meeting as an in-person meeting, given the uncertainties that we're all facing at the present moment. Tonight, we are, as a council, somewhat impacted by COVID, in that our treasurer, fortunately hasn't got COVID, but has had a pretty severe reaction to the booster dose that he received only yesterday. So he's not feeling his best. He's in fact been in bed for most of the day, but he has been brave enough to get up and join the meeting, but he does feel that he probably won't be able to take as active a part in it after he's given his presentation as he would normally do. The council did on Saturday send around the agenda for the meeting for a second time, and my opening statement, which is a 2-page document, which, if members would agree, I would like to take as read. If you don't agree, you can use the Q&A function just to type in very quickly no, and I will wait for 15 seconds to see whether there are any no's. That doesn't mean we're not going to take any questions on the what's in the opening statement. We clearly want to take questions on all the issues that are on members' minds, and but what we will try to do is to sequence those questions where possible to the relevant agenda items that come later in the meeting. I haven't seen any no's, so many thanks to you for taking my opening statement as read. At this point in time, there are 70 members participating in the webinar. That's slightly less than would have been the case at the 2 previous meetings. I think then at this early stage in the meeting, we were usually up at about 80 to 90 members. That's not surprising, because when I'm now going to ask Fiona to read out those members that have submitted apologies for absence, and also to tell you how many proxy votes have been cast in addition to those who have given apologies for absence, and those numbers are quite a bit larger than at our previous 2 webinar AGMs. So Fiona, could you read out the apologies for absence under agenda item 2, please?
Yes, we've received apologies from Terry and Anne Redshaw, number 18, John and Lynn Ty, 34, Austin and Sally Rogers, from 54, Graham White, from 57, Andy Robertson, from 120, and Steve and Joanna Mitchison, from 163. 34 proxies we have also received. There are a few members who have submitted proxies and who are also attending this evening, and unfortunately we won't be able to accept the proxy vote, so they will be deleted, but please use the polls to for your voting.
Fiona, thank you very much indeed. If members would agree, I'd like to move on to item 3 on the agenda. The minutes of Part 1 AGM held on the 8th of April were, I think, sent out in draft around midsummer, and were also circulated 3 weeks ago as alongside the agenda for the meeting. I've got the minutes in front of me, and obviously the first question I would ask of members is whether there are any points on that draft minutes which they felt were not accurately represented, and on which you would like to make suggest any amendments. I'll pause for a couple of 15 seconds or two to see whether anything is posted on the questions. If there are not points to be amended on the minutes, I would be asking members to approve them. And I would propose, unless any member would wish differently, that we do so through one member proposing, and proposing by putting their hand up, and then Fiona will identify who to select as a proposer. Fiona, have you selected anybody? You're mute, Fiona. You're mute.
Neil Livingston.
Thank you, Neil. And a seconder. Is there a seconder?
Andrew Williams.
Excellent. Many thanks, Andrews. So with a proposer and seconder, I think we could take the minutes as now approved. The report of council was sent out 2 Saturdays back. The majority of the issues in that report of council, apart from issues like landscaping, roads, are covered either in the Treasurer's statement, Treasurer's report, or in the boundaries demarcation presentation, which are the 2 next items on the agenda. But would any member like to post any questions on issues that are not in the to be covered under other items on the agenda? If it comes to the end of the meeting and you feel you'd asked a question, but didn't take the opportunity at this point in the agenda, I can assure you that I would be very happy to take further questions under any other business at the end of the meeting, because at this point in time, unless there is some problem with the posting of questions, I don't see any questions for this agenda item. Obviously, if you have any problems in hearing the speaker or in posting your questions, then that's exactly the sort of situation where you should be using the hands up function, because Julie will be, I'm sure, more than able to deal with any problems that you convey through the hands up function. And if she can't understand the issues, then you can use, that's an emergency situation, to use the chat function. So let's move on this basis. It looks as if Matt might be able to get back to bed somewhat sooner than he was expecting, given that we're now getting to the Treasurer's report at only several minutes into the meeting. So Matt.
Good evening, everybody. I hope you can see and hear me, but I'm going to screen share to show you some presentation slides. And I am searching for the button in vain. There it is, screen. Can everybody see the slides now. I'm hearing no reaction. I'm going to take it as a positive unless somebody tells me not.
Any hands raised, Julie?
No.
Oh, okay.
So when I'm sharing my screen, I can't see the chat and the participants. So hopefully people will shout out if anything comes up. So like in every annual Treasurer presentation, I reiterate our key objective, which is to look after our roads, and specifically the current target, which is a forecast as much as anything, is that we think it will cost between 800 and 900,000, including inflation, to replace the roads wholly. And we think that they will last until at least 2027. We consider that to be a conservative estimate, but our road specialists won't project beyond that date. But we will keep the objective under review each and every year between now and then. So I'm hoping that everybody's had a chance to read the management report, of which the Treasurer's report was part. I intend only to draw out some highlights in this presentation. The home-based gate legal costs were an eye-watering £500,000 over 4 years. Those have been split out in each accounts to date and will be split out again in the end August 21 accounts in due course. You were presented with the August 2020 accounts at the part 1 of this AGM earlier this year, and so those have gone off to Companies House. The year-end August 2021 accounts have only recently become available to directors from the accountants, so weren't in a state to be presented to this meeting, but we will present them to members in early 2022. Those show around 100k annual loss, which was in fact more like 100k gain, less 200,000 of the home-based legal costs coming off it. And that left us at the end of August with a reserve of around 275,000. Now, since the end of August counting date, we have spent money on some road repairs, so patched a lot of cracks and so forth. That was around 40,000. And we've also committed the money to fibre broadband. It's part prepaid and part yet to be paid. But nevertheless, the commitment there is 58k. Now, those amounts still leave us with a reserve around 275,000 still, because it occurred in a period where we had our annual subscriptions drawn, and also there were a number of development fees received. So we're still at that kind of 275 figure now. Now, what we do when we're projecting the finances of A.P.R.A, we particularly focus on the long-term plan, again with that main objective of replacing the roads as the primary objective. But a 5 or a 6 year plan is an accumulation of 5 or 6 individual years. So each of those years looks somewhat like this page, where we anticipate some subscription income, some other income, which is mainly development fees, but there's a few other bits and pieces in there. And then there are outgoes for administration, for occasional road repairs, which we think will probably be every 2 or 3 years, professional fees, landscaping, CCTV running costs as a separate matter. Any new CCTV or upgrades will be considered as a capital item in due course. And then a variety of other costs around tax, gully cleaning, the AGM, so forth. And so we think if members approve the recommended subscription rate at the next meeting, that will project a surplus of around 100k in the next year, ignoring the potential capital costs of gating and CCTV. We will hold a vote in the AGM in early 2022 to approve any subscription level. So there is no reaction we need from you tonight specifically to these numbers. It's more of a direction of travel. This is just more of the assumptions underlying it. We are assuming a 40k per annum development income. That's probably slightly on the conservative side. It's certainly been higher over the last 12 months, but we don't want to predicate the financial plan on continuation of that level if perhaps the economy dips. And we goal seek what subscription level we think we need to recommend to members in order to deliver those road replacements and pay for any selected capital projects between now and then. So more on that next year, but it is likely that we'll be recommending somewhere between 400 and 600 paid half yearly from 2022. We're recognising that the recommended rate is going up substantially, and we think by splitting it into 2 half yearly amounts, that will be more flexible for members' cash flows, as well as smoothing out the peaks and troughs for A.P.R.A as well. This is just a reminder of a waterfall chart that we showed this time at the AGM earlier this year. So none of these numbers have changed in this page. We were highlighting a baseline subscription level that was comparable to what's been paid before, identifying an increase because of bringing in GCS to support the administration, identifying that spending money on broadband would mean the subscriptions would need to be higher than otherwise, and then identifying some of the other capital projects. And so that was getting to an indicative £1,100 as a subscription rate. Now, we're also at pains to highlight the uncertainty around that number. So that number's in the diagonal line, the 1070 there, and we were identifying with the snazzy pink arrow that it could be higher or lower. The court case result was going to be one factor and is a negative factor in the update over the last 6 months. And bringing in more administration also costs money. Fibre, the membership decided on that at the last meeting. So we still have areas of uncertainty around whether members will want to press on with the boundaries initiatives and more upgraded cameras. And we also have the uncontrollable factors around what development income we might receive and what tarmac will ultimately cost in 5 years' time. So this is the same chart as I've just shown you. It's the same waterfall. If you identify the left-hand 3 items and continue to include the contingency, you get to around 700. Because the home-based result was worse than expected, we are likely to need to ask for around 800 per annum. And if members select to pursue the capital projects, that 800 could be 1200. In fact, we think now that the boundaries project will cost slightly more than is shown on this picture, and the CCV slightly less, but collectively they're still around the 400 figure. But as I say, we will do much more on this for the next meeting towards the beginning of next year, where we'll have much more specific proposals around demarcation, and we will update all the financial planning and present new slides like this in more detail and invite a lot more discussion. But I see there are a few questions in the information panel.
Would you like to answer first John Park's question? John
Sure.
only moved into the estate in the summer, so I think he probably we should issue a glossary of terms as part of our resident welcome letter, so that things like development income, which I can well understand is confusing him, we clarify earlier on. Would you like to answer John first?
Sure. So development income is fees that A.P.R.A charge to people or members or developers who are perhaps knocking down and rebuilding a new house, or perhaps adding an extension or an ancillary building outside. And so there is a lengthy development principles guide on the A.P.R.A website that explains all of the development guidelines around what's permitted and how builds should go on, and also has an appendix indicating the fees that are chargeable. Mark Lay, why is there such a focus on upgrading the road, which appears to be in condition?
Could you answer that in conjunction with Nigel Allen's question? Because Nigel is wanting roads replaced every 2 to 3 years, and Mark is wondering whether 2027 is too soon.
Yep. So I think the question of when to replace the roads is essentially up to members, but directors will make a recommendation, and directors in turn will rely on our expert advisors. So the firm that has done the recent patching, which I know is a firm that Nigel Allen is very keen on, which is called Spade Oak, they have advised how long they think the roads will last. And that's at the moment guiding our stated objective. I suppose if there was a vast majority of members that were asking to wholly replace the roads a lot quicker and perhaps pay twice as much to do so, then we would happily listen to that. But I haven't heard that that's universally the sound from the membership.
And we've got, I mean, the other point to make on Nigel's question is firstly that one of the distinguishing features of this estate is that our roads are not black tarmac. They are a much more warm colour. Now that colour change increases costs, I think, by something like 40%. Really, although Nigel, I have some sympathy with your remark that the roads are starting to look a bit like patchwork. To replace roads every 2 to 3 years, that might have been necessary if we'd used the previous contractor to do the surfacing. But with Spade Oak, they really do strongly feel, in no way are we twisting their arm, that it would be imprudent to be spending money before the roads have got into a lot different state to what they are post these repairs. The impact on member subscriptions of replacing every 2 to 3 years would be astronomical. And I think if other members wish it, we will put that something along those lines to a vote at the next AGM, which won't be more than 2 or 3 months away. But I think 2 to 3 years. Greg, have you got any private estate under your custody that replaces the roads with that sort of frequency? You're muted at the moment.
Good evening. No, typically, if I can use Burwood Park as an example, we've budgeted to replace the road surfaces every 15 years. And probably the likelihood of that is the major artery roads will be 15 years, and some of the smaller tertiary roads will be even longer than that. And also my experience on other private estates is 15 years is quite acceptable.
Thanks, Greg. And I should have introduced you to members first, because although I know you have been working as hard as you can to introduce yourself to residents when you come regularly onto the estate, I'm sure that quite a few people at the meeting haven't met you before. And I was going to ask you to introduce yourself when we came to the next agenda item, but is anything more you'd like to say by way of introduction of GCS?
No, I'll save it to my presentation. Thanks, Nigel.
Okay, great. Matt,
Yes, I can see the chat. So shall I press on with the questions?
okay, I might have misinterpreted.
Yeah. So I'm seeing
Nigel's
that.
question.
Yeah. So
Andrew Williams.
Nigel wishes to replace the roads in 2 to 3 years, and then every 7 to 8 thereafter. So it's
Right.
just a question of how long we wait for the next replacement. And several other members have kind of pitched in to say similar. But obviously there's a variety of opinions, because we have, for example, Mark Lay saying, why are we doing it so soon? So I think maybe we should take that one away and sort of poll members further and sort of study the options.
Yep.
James Hall said, when were the roads last replaced? I wasn't around at the time, but I think it was
Brian
somewhere
will
between
tell us.
2000 and 2010.
2011, wasn't it, Brian?
Or was it 2011?
I
Right.
believe so. I wasn't on the committee at the time, but as far as I can remember, it was about 20.
I'll try and look it up while we're still talking. There was another question from Edward Puller about spreading the court cases. So Edward, when I was talking about the court cases over 4 years, I was talking about the last 4 years. So it's gone on that long. So we accumulated costs in 2017, 18, 19, 20, 21. And so that 500,000 is the accumulation of those costs. So they are all paid. But the fact that those are no longer in our reserves would have been higher otherwise, means that subscriptions need to be higher going forwards than they would have otherwise been. So that was all I was saying about the subscriptions perhaps being 800 going forwards rather than 700 in the waterfall charts. There's a very detailed question from Trevor about.
Let's answer Trevor's question as part of the next agenda item, because it is directly attributable to the resolution on tendering, which is in the next agenda item, Matt.
Good. Are there any other questions about the finances or the accounts?
It didn't feature in the presentation slides, but in the report of council, Matt has given an operating budget for the current financial year, which is one of the issues that we agreed to do as part of the recommendations of the governance working party that was taken to members in April. No questions on that before we move on? Any questions beyond those of Edward Collar on the home base case as such? I did say in my chairman's report that I will remember making a commitment at the meeting a year ago that we would issue a report on lessons learnt. That report hasn't become available as quickly as one might have hoped. The reason being that this litigation was only finally wrapped up at a court hearing on June the 23rd. And we have been trying for 5 months to get the judge to agree the transcript of that meeting. And we only received it just literally 7 or 8 days ago. And that is a rather pertinent input to the lessons learnt report. That report is being prepared under a small group chaired by Tej, who only joined the council literally a month after the first home base hearing in November 2020, a year ago. So the people producing that report will be interviewing members of council and ex-members of council that were involved, and obviously the claimants as well. We would expect to be able to bring that forward to members in the new year. Is there no more questions on item 5 of the agenda, the Treasurer's report? In which case, we'll keep your question, Trevor, in reserve for me to answer after Greg's presentation. But if members agree, I'd like to move on to agenda item 6, which will have a vote attached to it. And I'll answer Trevor's question before that vote. but ask Greg now to put on screen his presentation. Greg.
Thank you, Nigel. Good evening, everybody. I hope you can hear and see me in my presentation okay. Firstly, by way of introduction, I'd just like to tell you that I'm a director of GCS, as my screen says, and I've been in the property management business for some 27 years. The last several years of those have been concentrated on the management of private residential estates. Really going back to the Coombe estates, two of the Coombe estates in Kingston, which we've managed for about 12 years, the Hockering estate in Woking, and Burwood Park, which we've been involved with now for 7 years. And in my tenure at Burwood Park, I was largely responsible for the implementation of the gate access control there, and some years ago also responsible for the automation of the Hockering estate gates. So I've got a bit of experience in this area. Moving on, the work that we've carried out to date, very much alongside the boundary demarcation project working party, was to take the scope of works outlined in the planning application and produce an indicative costing. And this has been achieved through approaching a single supplier for each component. The idea being that with your approval tonight, we will go on to produce final drawings and a scope of works and enter into a tendering process to bring the results back to members at a future meeting for another vote to take the process further. I'm now going to go through the presentation. A copy of this was sent out in advance, so hopefully you've all had an opportunity to look at it. And you'll have seen at the end of it that contained a number of anticipated questions, some of which had already been responded to in previous discussions. However, there will of course be an opportunity to take any further questions at the end of this presentation. So moving on. A good place to start is to look at the chronology of this project. And this started when a Council of Members subcommittee was formed back in 2017. And this was done to consider potential gate solutions. In the following year, in 2018, discussions got underway with Elmbridge Borough Council. And in 2019, an application was made under permitted development, which was refused as it was not considered to qualify for permitted development. Coming closer to date, in 2020, the Boundaries Demarcation Project Working Party was formed and a fresh approach was taken with a preference for rising barriers rather than gates. Later that year, the Working Party's proposal to make a planning application was taken to the AGM and received 90% members' approval. Coming on to the current year, in April 2021, at part 1 of this AGM, a further vote was taken and 83% of members supported taking the necessary steps to implement the proposal, subject to further voting along the way at key stages. Next slide, we should remind ourselves of the motivations behind the project. Some newer members to A.P.R.A may not be fully aware of these, and they've been summarised in 4 key areas. The first one, to improve the ambience of the estate and emphasise private status. It's felt that the existing signage declaring Ashley Park Estate as a private residential estate is seen as ineffective. And also, a number of large residential developments are shooting up around the estate, with Stompon Lane, Station Road, the Birdseye project, and New Zealand Avenue Homebase project they're all in progress and completion coming soon. And for this is the reason that it's felt that the barriers will provide a more significant demarcation of the boundaries of Ashley Park. The next motivation was to improve pedestrian safety. And the current situation is that all users, be they vehicle users, cyclists or pedestrians, all use the roadways. This solution we're proposing will separate out the roadways to vehicles only, and pedestrians and cyclists will use the pedestrian gate entrances. The third on our list is to improve road safety. Currently, there is a single entry access by both inbound and outbound traffic, and the idea of the presentation is to have a two-way staggered barrier system separated by narrow central reservation. We also feel that passing through a barrier should have a calming effect on vehicle speeds across the estate. And the fourth and final motivation is to improve resident security. There is currently no system to establish a record of vehicles entering the estate. The implementation of high definition CCTV by recording vehicles as well as pedestrians and cyclists entering the estate will improve this. And it's also envisaged that A.P.R.A to record and display the number plates of all vehicles entering or leaving the estate. So where we are at the moment, all the plans which follow in this presentation have been approved by Alnbridge Borough Council and agreed by the Project Working Party. We're going to go on in a moment to look at the individual gates, but there may be some modifications. Each slide on the individual gates shows a drawing of the proposal submitted to Elmbridge. These may vary through modifications made now and in the next stages. And these modifications largely are to improve the aesthetics, to provide more cost-effective solutions, and to improve safety. So moving on to the first of the gates, which is Charlotte Gate. This represents 60% of vehicle traffic and 75% of foot traffic, so is by far the busiest gate of the four. So what we have here, we have a two-way rising barrier. The incoming barrier will be set back to allow more road vehicles entering off the roundabout. The road barriers will open on approach, and this will be activated by a combination of the A.P.R.A camera and induction loops set into the tarmac, which detect the presence of a vehicle. These are all effectively switches which operate the gate. The pedestrian access will be located on the right-hand side beyond the sloping wall and will be opened by a push-button control, which will release a magnetic lock. And gates and fences are to be of a steel balustrade design, and that includes the section to level out the sloping walls as well. The next most popularly used entrance is the Tudor Gate, which is responsible for something like 30% of vehicular traffic using it. It's proposed here that this will become a two-lane barrier to improve safety and traffic flow. And to facilitate this, the two piers will need to be removed as the current road entrance isn't wide enough. On this gate, the pedestrian gate will be accessed through the right-hand arch as we look at it from the outside, with the left-hand arch being fenced off. The spur gate, which accounts for the remaining 10% or so of traffic, is very much the same specification as Charlotte Gate, with the pedestrian entrance located on the left-hand side here. That entrance will be located at the end of the wall rather than in the diagram where it's seen as next to the pillar. A unique feature of this gate is that posts for the rising barriers on the central reservation will be collapsible, and this is to accommodate extra wide vehicles in the rare event that these might require access onto the estate. The other gates will have road openings sufficient to accommodate such vehicles as fire engines, refuse vehicles, and the vast majority of construction plant. It's really difficult to envisage what sort of extra wide vehicles they might be, but possibly one that springs to mind where the spur gate would be used with the collapsible barriers would be if we had to bring an extra large crane in on a construction or some big plant for resurfacing the roads, which was wider than the in section of the road. But it would be very seldom used. Moving on to the Ashley Park Crescent Gate. A unique feature of this is that A.P.R.A doesn't own the approach road. Therefore, we are unable to install the induction loops in the tarmac at the entrance. This means that all access will be controlled via the A.P.R.A camera. As with the other gate cameras, this camera will be set to allow all vehicle entries, but will record all vehicles coming in. The Ashley Park Crescent Gate is a single barrier entrance due to the relatively low volume of traffic to and from the cul-de-sac. The diagram is a little bit incorrect in that it shows a single barrier. What it will actually be is that the walls will stay where they are, and there will be a static barrier on the in entrance on the left-hand side of the road and a rising barrier on the right-hand side of the road as we look at it. And having it on this side of the road will also give further protection to the oak tree, which is more towards the left-hand side of the road. The pedestrian gate on this side will be to the left as we look at it at the end of that wall. So this slide shows a photo of the Seven Hills Road Gate to St George's Hills, which I put it up just to demonstrate some similar features to what is being proposed. So the first thing I draw your attention is that we would propose that we have traffic lights at each entrance. And in my opinion, this is a must-have. As in the rare incident of a collision where somebody drives into the barrier, it will provide a definitive answer as to where the fault lies. And this is really critical if we're talking about insurance claims. Barrier skirts. When we did Burwood Park, we initially went without skirts for aesthetic reasons, because we thought they looked too much like railway crossings. But we soon added them to enhance security in the second phase of the project. We see there we have a central reservation. This is twofold. Firstly, when the barrier booms come down, they need a rest to sit on, otherwise they're susceptible to damage. And secondly, it separates the incoming and outgoing traffic with this central reservation, which will also be fenced along. The A.P.R.A display I've already covered, but that will be an LED display which will show vehicles registrations coming in and out of the estate. And the pedestrian gate there, the one we see at St George's Hill, looks rather like a ladder and looks easily scalable. So we are looking at the balustrade steel design rather than that. Moving on to costing, this slide shows indicative costs for each gate, with the other axis breaking down the cost for components. All costs are inclusive of VAT, because A.P.R.A is not VAT registered. Just a couple of other notes. The Tudor Gate is comparatively more expensive than others, and this is due to the requirement to remove the piers to widen the road, and that work may involve some structural supports, etc. We're not quite clear on that yet. Similarly, Ashley Park Crescent currently has no electricity supply, so it's proportionately expensive given that it is a single barrier entrance. But most importantly, on this slide, I need to emphasize once again that all costings are currently indicative, and it is hoped that through a rigorous tendering process, some savings can be achieved. So the next steps, provided of course the project receives a favourable vote at this meeting, these will be the next steps in the process. So step one is the tender preparation phase. We will take feedback from this meeting and consolidate that to facilitate drafting an agreement of the final scope of works. This will then be followed by drafted technical drawings, which we will need to give out to the tenderees so they can provide like-for-like tenders. And then we go out to tender with a selected group of contractors. Probably there may be some that will provide all the elements of the project and others that will provide component parts of it. We anticipate this process will take approximately 12 weeks, allowing for the Christmas period as well. And after that period, we will come back to the members to take a vote again on the tenders received and the council and members' recommendations. Once we've got through the EGM vote, and for that we will allow 3 weeks before the meeting for people to decide, we will go on to the project award phase, and where we will instruct the successful bidders. And then we approximate a 4-week lead time before commencement of the initial works. And during this time, there'll be an opportunity to put out further communications. And the final phase then is the delivery, which is anticipated to take about 13 weeks and will involve an initial phase to relocate street furniture and to commence the civil works. And there's a natural flow to this. We do the civil works and the gate works and electricity works together, and then finally put the gates and the rising barriers in, and then commission them. So in summary, now that we have planning permission, which has been granted, we are asking for approval from the council approval for the council to incur expenditure of up to £10,000 in preparing the detailed specifications and drawings for a tender process to be conducted for the implementation of these proposals at all 4 of the gates. Thank you. I'm going to unshare my screen now.
Great. Thank you, Greg. Thus far, we have got 4 questions. I think the logical sequence is that I will answer Trevor's question. I'd ask Tej to answer John Park's question. And before do so, just for the benefit of members, read out the question. Matt Barnes to answer Mark Lay's question about VAT registration, and perhaps Tej could also answer Matt Taylorson's at the same time about operating costs. Now, the important point to emphasize is that in no way are we asking members to vote for this proposal for boundaries demarcation to happen. at this meeting. We are doing as we have done right the way since the project working party was formed, of getting member authority before we take a further step on spending money. And you might recollect at the AGM a year ago, we took a vote just like this for the expenditure on getting the planning permission approval. Little did we know at the time that the process would be so protracted and we wouldn't get that approval till October. But you can see that very quickly after that approval came through, the Boundaries Working Party got back together again on regular meetings and have taken the thinking along in a quite thorough way. Now, Trevor is suggesting that £10,000 is too much for a tender and that we should take the free service of contractors to help us do it for nothing. Those of us that have been involved in the management of very large capital projects know that a tender process properly conducted can make a considerable difference to the cost and the quality of the project. So we make no excuse for suggesting to members that we do a proper tender process. If all we do is to rely on the free services of companies that want to make sure we buy from them, we will not have done a proper tender process. That said, those of us that have had prior experience do feel that £10,000 is the very, very top figure, and a figure that we are pretty confident that we can make a major reduction on. And the reason why we say that is that, yes, the Boundaries Working Party have spoken to a number of potential providers during the process leading to where we are today, particularly to providers of CCTV, A.P.R.A, and the rising barriers, less so to those that would be doing the civil works. And I think Greg, in coming up at his estimate, has not been fully informed about all the information that we have collected up till now, and that his number I see as very as high as we could possibly consider spending, can be brought down because although we don't want to lay back and let each contractor try and do things for us for nothing, a lot of the work that has already been provided will allow us to do a thorough tender without making it a Rolls-Royce type tender. And so I am not going to change the resolution to reduce the figure below 10,000 because, as I said right at the start, a very thorough and competitive tender is what we want. And that's what members should want, because that will give us the lowest price and probably just as importantly, the greatest reliability from the operating components when they are installed. So that will be my answer to Trevor's question. Fair point. We too have talked to contractors that will do things for nothing. They certainly will not do the quality and precision of drawings that are necessary to make sure that when you've accepted a tender, the supplier won't come along and say, well, you never you never told us you needed that included in it. And that's another reason why we shouldn't be using just the free offers. We should be doing something where we can hold the successful contractor to account and make sure that he's not trying to get more costs from us than is tendered for. Brian, as someone that's done more contracts than any of us, if you unmute, is there anything you would like to say?
No, I think you've covered all the points very carefully. I think the other thing is to make sure that we've got good project management of the whole thing so that all the elements work together and we don't get work being done by one party first where it shouldn't have been done and we get ourselves into a problem area.
Yeah.
So I think the project management is extremely important. And as we know from the roads that we did last time, you know, we need to get the better contractors to do the work because that'll give us longevity and minimize the maintenance costs.
Yep. Yep. Could we go on and ask Tej to cover John Park's and Matt Taylorson's comments, and perhaps also one that's come in more recently, Tej, from Martin Haxby about something which I think a lot of us regret, namely the need to widen the road at the Tudor Gate by demolishing the turrets. Martin has asked whether we had considered an alternative. So could you take those three, Tej?
Sure. Yeah, good evening, everybody. So I'll start off with John Park's question, which is asking, will there be further development of the pedestrian pathways once pedestrians enter the estate, or will they just be entry points and pedestrians can walk where they please? And the answer is, so they will just be entry points, and that will avoid, obviously, pedestrians walking in the same spaces where vehicles are initially entering the estate, as opposed to what happens now. Next question that we had was from Matt Taylorson, who was asking, what could the potential ongoing costs be per year for running and maintenance? Having checked in with Greg Smythe, he's suggesting that the running costs would be somewhere in the region of £5,000 to £8,000 per annum for all of the gates, which is a sort of proxy of what is being spent at Burwood Park. And then the next question I was going to answer was regards to Martin Haxby's question about the Tudor turrets. That is a topic that on the project working party we did spend quite a lot of time considering, because they are obviously a very attractive feature when entering the estate. But the drawback with the turrets is the width of the road, and having a sort of narrow width there requires cars to enter in a way which wouldn't be optimal if there was a two-way entry-exit system. And I think that the proposal that we've come up with is probably the best compromise that we can, which will allow us to have actually slightly better traffic flow there than we have currently, and still have a relatively attractive feature as we enter the estate. And with good landscaping, I think things should certainly improve there. Nigel, did you want to take any of the other questions there?
Let me have a look at Nigel Allen. Will the residents of Ashley Park Crescent now pay the same fees as the rest of Ashley Park? You can see that there is very, very little difference in the cost of the Ashley Park Crescent gates as compared with those at the other entrances. We do believe that the boundaries demarcation project is a full community project and therefore should be paid for by the whole community rather than Ashley Park Crescent paying for their gate. That would be against our ethos that Ashley Park is at present is just as much part of the community as any other part of the estate. But we would be adding to the fee that Ashley Park residents currently pay, basically the same increment for the boundaries demarcation project as the rest of the community pays. That, I think, in part answers your question in terms of fully equalizing the road rates. That is not a matter that has been discussed by council, and therefore clearly I cannot give you an answer. Matthew Harding, is it the intention to deter non-residents from using Ashley Park Avenue as a pass-through to the town centre? If so, will the pedestrian gates require a code? It isn't the intention. It never has been the intention to stop non-resident pedestrians from entering the estate, as long as they behave in a manner which is in accordance with our bylaws, and therefore we will not, the gates, as I think has been made clear in Greg's presentation, will open on the press of a button to any pedestrian that wants to use them. And they, given the fact that quite frequently people don't close gates after them, there will be also an auto close mechanism. Martin Haxby, if we really want to restrict vehicle access, why don't we have a fob system on all gates except one which all parties would use? That there again, Martin, has been something which has been absolutely central to the proposals right from the start, when this was first brought to residents a year ago. There is a very strong fob system in place, obviously at St George's Hill and at Burwood Park. In both instances, those fob systems have been necessary because there were an awful lot of non-residents using the estate roads as a rat run. That has not been an issue at Ashley Park, at least thus far. And therefore, we don't see the need to give residents fobs. It's considerably easier for them if they can get in and out without the use of fobs. So I think that answers that one. Is there a simple alternative to destroying the Tudor Gate, Tej?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think if there was, we would have certainly gone for that. And as I said before, it's something that we spent a lot of time looking at. And as you'll see from the EBC drawing in page 6 of the GCS presentation, we've got an entrance into the estate and an entrance out of the estate, so that two ways of traffic can flow through, as they do now, but not very well, because you have a kind of chicane to get around the turrets. If we were to put an electronic barrier there, within the existing turrets, it would be a single barrier, and that would obviously affect traffic flows. So this is the best compromise that we could come up with, given the limitations of that particular entrance.
Right, there is a question which actually I was going to cover in my summing up before we went for a vote. That is from Peter Conroy, about addressing any possible impact of the proposed gates on both resident and non-resident rights of way, as we will want to avoid expensive litigation. Absolutely agree to that last sentence. Obviously, this is something that we have looked at and considered carefully. There could be some possible challenge if we were restricting vehicle access only to residents through the use of fobs. But given that the whole design of the location of the cameras at the gates and the use of rising barriers rather than gates, rising barriers, obviously giving access much more quickly than an opening gate would do, means that at present our residents, because exit is only across half the road, have to slow down at the when they come to the gates, to the entrances, and the rising barriers, as long as you slow down, will already be up by the time you get through. So vehicle access rights are not impacted by the proposed boundaries demarcation level measures. And the same could be said of pedestrians, although we do assert the position that there is no rights of way for residents, for non-resident pedestrians or non-resident cyclists. We would, there again, I've covered that in my previous question about the pedestrian gates opening on the press of a button. So I think that covers Peter's question. There was one earlier about how much is the breakdown of that 10,000, which I've said earlier probably won't be as much as 10,000. But Greg, could you answer that question for us?
Sure, Nigel. I think it's important to say that the figure said up to 10,000 and not 10,000. Part of the expense, well, another thing to mention is that it's gross with VAT. So the reality is it's 8,000, 8,500 roughly, and not 10. 2,000 or 3,000 of it we're projecting will be spent on drawings, technical drawings, to allow us to go to tender. And the remainder will be for my firm's fees for carrying out the work. So there's no money being paid to contractors for them tendering, coming into the tender process.
Okay. Maybe we could now move across to the question from Mark Clay, which I think, Matt Barnes, are you still feeling well enough to answer questions, or?
I've come back. I was away from keyboard for a bit.
Okay.
I saw this question. I think that registration will be counterproductive because it means you can reclaim VAT expenditure, but you have to charge VAT on every item of income. So immediately the subscriptions will be 20% higher, as with the development fees, and then we'd get it back, or some of it back later. So it's not something we are particularly courting.
That said, though, Mark, it is something which the council are keeping under regular review, purely and simply because there had been recent changes in that case law as applied to associations such as ourselves. This is an area which Greg Smith has quite a lot of knowledge of, because Burwood Park are VAT registered, but there were reasons why Burwood Park became VAT registered, which I don't think carry across to us. But we can assure you as a council that this is being kept under regular review. John Bowden has asked whether we would expect the cricket club to continue having 20 to 30 vehicles enter past Silverdale. That, of course, is an issue which has been a long-standing arrangement with them using the Charlotte Gate on match days. And clearly, it would be more difficult were we talking, John, about fog control of the gates, but on the basis that they open to everybody, that will not affect the access for genuine users of the cricket club. Nigel Allen, I think, has made more of an observation than a question. He remarks that I steered away towards generally whether they pay the same, they, i.e. Ashley Park present residents, pay the same as everybody else. And perhaps the committee could now therefore please consider this. In my view, there is no reason why there should be any difference. It's very important, Nigel, that an outgoing chairman, which I am, should not bind his successor. So I will not say anything beyond what I have already said in my earlier answer. Jeffrey Brown says, maybe I missed this, but how will delivery drivers enter the gated park? They'll enter, Jeffrey, exactly as they do at the present moment, because the barriers will open to them. So that's the answer to that question. John Bowden is asking, could gates enable this to be controlled in some way? I'm not sure what this means. If it's delivery drivers, I'm not sure we as residents would want delivery drivers' access to the estate to be controlled, because we won't get our deliveries so easily. If I've misinterpreted your question, John, maybe you could type a clarification. But what I think is a big feature, or an attractive feature for residents of these proposals, which perhaps didn't get enough prominence in the presentation you've just had, is that it will include A.P.R.A, automatic number plate recognition, with a display panel to tell the driver that we have recorded their registration. And with the estate, unfortunately, having had a spate of burglaries in the past month, I'm not saying that A.P.R.A will stop them, but there is a very good track record that A.P.R.A has deterred people of ill intent because of the knowledge that their numbers have been recorded. And under our current system, we neither record the numbers, nor can we on every occasion, particularly in the hours of darkness, be sure that we have actually able to identify the registration numbers on our cameras. Clearly, fibre will make a big difference because our cameras are limited not just by their download speed, but also by their upload speed. So when we have fibre connected A.P.R.A, then the security against delivery drivers or others coming onto the estate will be greatly enhanced. Final one from John Bowden. Cricket club access. David or Brian can help me on this question. It is not the case that the agreement with the cricket club only allows use and access for maintenance. You may be confusing with the Ashley Park Crescent Gate into Ashley School, where back in the late 1990s, the council spent, in today's value, something like £200,000 to defend that case, which we won for the benefit of the Ashley Park Crescent residents. That confines the entry through that gate to a motorized mower, but there isn't the same restriction on use of the cricket club access through Silverdale Avenue. And then Michael Robinson, although you say we are not looking to restrict non-resident vehicle traffic at the moment, will you be future-proofing the installation so that a fob system can be added without too much disruption or cost in the future? We're not sort of specifically designing it for anything else but what's on the box in the presentation that's already been made. But I think Greg would, with his greater knowledge than us of the different installations, would, because Burwood Park have, for example, moved from automatic, from gates like pedestrian gates like our own to ones which are now fob controlled. And I think, Greg, you did that at not too great a cost.
It was quite a high cost to do that, but just to answer the question directly, when we put the trunking in to carry all the cables to the various points where they're needed, it would make common sense to run ropes in there so that other installations could be, so it's basically to future-proof the design, and that's commonplace to do that.
That's commonplace, notwithstanding the fact our intention is what we've put on the box.
Absolutely.
Great. We don't seem to have any more questions. In introducing the vote, which reads as follows: approval is given for the council to incur expenditures of up to 10,000 in preparing the tender drawings and for a tender process to be conducted for the implementation of these proposals at each of the 4 gates. That is the vote. The vote is in no way seeking approval for the project. It is seeking approval for this incremental additional expenditure. We hope you will support it as strongly as you did back in December of last year and again in April of this year, because all the work that the Boundaries Commission Project Working Party have done would suggest that this proposal, this boundaries demarcation measures are just as necessary as we saw them to be a year ago or more. And as I say, we are confident that a tender process will probably give us an outcome of gates which are extremely reliable, because there is a big difference between the various suppliers in terms of reliability, and hopefully at a cost below the indicative estimates that you have seen in Greg Smith's earlier presentation. So can I ask Julie to put the vote up, and you have it before you. She will keep this open for about 30 seconds or so when the number count ceases to go up. As Fiona said right at the start, if you submitted a proxy and are now going to vote, Fiona will will have cancelled your proxy, and we'll give you the numbers later on. I think we've probably settled on this one. The votes. Fiona, would you like to add the proxy numbers to the numbers on the screen?
4 is 72. Is that 4? It's 40 plus 30. And against,
Well, 40 plus 30 is 70.
42, I think it is.
Okay,
42
okay.
plus 30 is 72, and against is 7 plus 3, 10, and 10 against.
Okay, so I mean that is actually almost. Oh, sorry. Any abstentions?
2 abstains.
Okay. Well, I mean, that is extremely the same extremely strong and robust support that was given. It's almost an exact replica, although with a slightly lower turnout, to what we got last December and today, last April. So many thanks to members for their continued support for further work on this project. John Park had just asked, how do we vote on Zoom? John, could you type in whether you did or not? That's fine, he said, so I think it's all right. Okay, jolly good. Well, many thanks, as I said, for your support of the extra work. I can tell you that we will already the Boundaries Working Party will already be moving forward on discussing and structuring the tender process with Greg even before Christmas. So the Boundaries Working Party are certainly right behind your enthusiasm for moving forward on this project, and will give more time to it. We now move to agenda item 7, membership of the council. There are, with great gratitude on our part, 2 residents who are offering themselves for appointment for the first time. And Matthew Barnes is offering himself reappointment on the basis of 3 members retire by rotation. Those 3 being David Reynolds and myself and Matt Barnes. What I really like on this is that we've set it up that if you really want to vote individually for each of the 3, there is the ability to do so. But unless anybody types on Q&A that they want votes taken on all 3, I think it would be preferable if we ask for a proposer to put a hand up and the seconder to put a hand up. But I will wait for a couple of minutes, not a couple of minutes, 30 seconds or so for anybody to say that they wanted to vote individually. If so, post on the questions. So can I ask for a proposer?
Trevor Wood.
And a seconder?
Nigel Allen.
Thanks, Trevor. Thanks, Nigel. And congratulations to Matt, Johanna, and John Erskine. Could you, Julie, just bring them onto screen, because they might members might not know them. There's Joanna. Anything you want to say, Joanna?
Just hello to everyone. I think you saw from my bio that I'm fairly new to the estate, and I look forward to being a member of the council and yeah, just working with everyone together.
Lives right next to the Tudor Gate.
I do.
So, I know you are one of those that is very sorry to see the structural changes made, but I know also that you recognise the need for making that exit and entrance somewhat safer. And John Erskine, you're muted at the moment, John, so I'm not sure whether we can.
Is that better?
That's better.
Okay,
Yep.
great. Well, thanks for voting for me. I'm pleased to be back. For those of you who know me already, it's a shame that we're still doing these meetings virtually. Maybe one day we'll get back to normal, let's say. You'll see me about the estate, usually most days. And I'd just like to say, I hope I can do as professional a job as these people have been doing. I'm very impressed by the presentations.
Thanks, John. And Matt.
I think everybody's bored of hearing me now. I won't add to it.
Well, I'm sure they're happy that they'll be hearing a lot more of you in the future. So that's a good thing. I'm going to come on to chair succession. If members would agree or want to even know about it later in the agenda, I'd like first, if you're agreeable, to introduce the motion, another motion that does need a vote and which is voted on every year, that being A.P.R.A's development guidance. We did, and you'll see within the report of council, we did do a member survey on asking certain questions about development guidance earlier in the year. The results of that survey are given as part of the explanatory, as part of the development committee report within your report of council. It is on the basis of that survey that we have put forward the recommendation that we don't make any changes to the development guidance, and that we don't make any changes to the fees. The fees have gone up recently in Burwood Park, but our fees are still comparable, probably slightly ahead of Burwood Park's new fee level. In terms of our guidance is probably less liberal in terms of some of the constraints that we apply, probably most obviously on roofs, where I think in Burwood Park, Greg, they can be as high as 10 meters. Yeah?
9.85 to be precise.
Okay, right. Well, we wouldn't, under our guidance, it would be very difficult to build a roof that high, but it would still be very easy to have a nicely designed house with 3 living levels. And I think certainly the Burwood Park residents that I know, and maybe they're because they're part of the old fogies like myself, think that Burwood Park is becoming a little bit spoilt in character by the newer developments. Newer developments have got to happen, but we're pleased that that survey has suggested that residents seem to think we've got our development guidance at about the right sort of balance between allowing people to build nice new houses, but trying to keep, as far as possible, the ambience of the estate. So, Julie, could we put up this vote on agenda item 8 to approve the guidance? And this is something that we vote on every year. Are you ready, Fiona, to add proxies?
I am. It is. So they're just going up a bit. 74, 4 against, and 4 abstain.
Okay, excellent. Well, that motion is carried, and thanks.
Oh, it's got up to 42.
Thanks for support on that one. Now, no members posted any requests to add items under any other business.
Nigel,
Sorry.
I've had one request for any other business from Tej.
Oh, right. Okay.
Hi guys. So it was just a quick one, really. Obviously, Nigel and David are going to not be seeking re-election here and retiring from the COM, and I think it's very appropriate that we all say thank you, particularly from the COM, for all the work that you've done. And you know, having been involved with the COM for the last year, I see what goes on behind the scenes. It's a lot of work, often a thankless task. So thank you very much.
Well, thanks for that, Tej. I wasn't expecting it, and I'm sure David wasn't either, but many thanks for it. I did give members right at the start when I talked about opening remarks and about agenda item 4 on questions on the report of council, say we'd take more at the end if there were any, but I don't see any. And if you want to post another one, you can do it while I make my closing remarks. Succession. Obviously, I did not want to stand down unless and until I was felt that there was strong succession. And I think what I'm about to tell you ought to reassure members that there is indeed very strong succession. It is in no sense because of any characteristic of me that 2 members of council are going to take a joint chair role. They are doing so, and the 2 that I am talking about is Tej Jagdev and John Erskine. The reason why I think members should see a joint chair role as an extremely good way forward for leadership of the council. And this, of course, is all subject to election at the next council meeting, because the appointment of a chairman is for the council to decide. But at the same time, I did not want to feel that the council were just going to not make a decision when they made that decision, when that happens. John, as you know, has an awful lot of experience of serving on the council in the past, but he's taken leave of it since 2010. when a lot of things have happened on the estate, whereas Tej only joined a year ago. So John has two characteristics which Tej has less, i.e. the time to commit to the council chair work, and experience of the past, and all the issues that A.P.R.A are dealing with go back in many respects to when we were founded 66 years ago. And John doesn't go that far back, but he certainly goes further back than Tej does, who members so wisely elected a year ago. Tej, being in a very demanding job as the Chief Operating Officer, has far less time, but the time that he gives, he delivers incredibly good judgments to our deliberations. And he also is of the increasing number of family, and a lot of the members have grandchildren, but and are retired, but we've got an increasing number that have young children and are very busy at work, and that is what Tej will so well complement the many strengths that John brings in. So I hope you as members are pleased that that is likely to be the decision that the council will make when they next meet. And for me personally, a great thanks to Tej and John for being willing to take on that role. And I wish them all the very best of luck going forwards. And so all the very best. I haven't seen any more questions posted.
No,
so,
there haven't.
Sorry?
No, there haven't been.
There haven't been. So thank you very much to the members for giving their time tonight. I'm sure we've got a lot more participating than would have been the case if we'd gone forward with an in-person meeting. And I think, Julie, you are going to launch before people finally press the leave button, for those that can spare the time just to fill in a survey, which will take no more than a minute or two, if you could put it on the screen. Yeah.
James loaded it as a survey to fill in as you leave.
Did he?
Yes. So as you leave, it asks you to fill in a quick survey.
Okay. So could we ask you to put the poll up?
No, it comes as, sorry, as you leave, you get a
Oh,
link to fill in a survey.
Okay, excellent.
It said that's how you did it last time.
Okay, well, good night, everybody. Have a great Christmas. So let's hope we all can get through without any challenges that we had last year. And thanks very much for attending. Good night. Good.
There are just
Okay.
panelists left in the room now.
Excellent.
Should we
Julie,
stop
thanks.
recording?
You start recording as well.
We're still on YouTube, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I did check out the YouTube, and it said there was one person watching, and I do believe that was me. So
I think we're still streaming.
That's very sad.